What gave you the courage to disrupt a major Microsoft event with the AI CEO, Mustafa Suleiman, also a fellow Arab?
AI weapons to the Israeli military. 50,000 people have died, and Microsoft.
We know that the needle is being moved at these companies. Like, we know that executives are, for once, starting to grapple with, okay, what is the cost of having these contracts? Because ultimately, what these corporations care about is just profits. So the moment they're going to stop being complicit in genocide is when we make it.
And you said, how dare you celebrate when children are being killed? Students disrupted an event held by Microsoft at Imperial College London on Wednesday. And I think during the UK NTO, it's like Glenn Robinson's speech about Microsoft's AI technology and Azure cloud services.
Stop using AI for genocide in our region.
Do you consider yourself a whistleblower? Before she became a symbol of defiance inside big tech, Ibtihal Aboussad was just like many of us, a daughter of migration, a curious mind drawn to the promise of technology, and a young professional trying to find purpose in a fast-moving world. But somewhere between writing lines of code and climbing the corporate ladder at Microsoft, she stumbled on something she couldn't unsee. Her labor was powering a genocide. Today, we're speaking with Ibtihal, former software engineer at Microsoft, whistleblower, and activist, about what it means to disrupt from within, the role of tech workers in our collective liberation, and how her personal journey from Morocco to Canada to the belly of big tech led her to take one of the most courageous stands in tech industry's recent history. So, Ibtihal, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having this podcast and having me on it.
Where did you grow up, and what would you say shaped your worldview?
So I grew up in Morocco, so I was there for 17 years before moving to the United States for university. And I would say, as many people know, and some people don't necessarily know, Morocco and like North Africa overall does have a history of just resistance against colonialism, which was something that I learned about early on, like from a younger age. And so like in my head, like the point that yeah, you have to take matters in your own hands, and you have to fight as a people, and not necessarily expect like freedom and liberation from those that oppress you has been a constant notion just from our history in North Africa. So I would say in terms of just context, that is like the part of our history that growing up marked me the most, and probably definitely influenced my perception of yeah, like resistance and struggling in these years.
That doesn't surprise me, and I guess it makes me all the more curious. Was there a moment in your life, and maybe I'm projecting here, as a student or even earlier, where you felt a clear sort of pull towards standing up for what's right, even when it was uncomfortable? Because you definitely did that in the video that we all have seen, but had you had similar experiences with that?
I will say the moments, and they're more recent than I would want to admit, but the moments where I felt I had started building up the, I guess like like people say courage, but I don't think that's the right, like I think it's more of an obligation. Like I think it's just removing like unwarranted fear. But I think witnessing what the student movement has done in the past couple of years, I think for me was the biggest remover of these barriers. Like just seeing like young people who have everything to lose, like it's like a degree, it's like years of your life spent trying to like achieve this, title of graduate, and just putting that all on the line for a cause that they care about. Like that to me just does like didn't let me feel like anything I could sacrifice or lose was like worth caring about when I had a chance to speak up.
It's so interesting how, despite me having certain moments like this early on, it was watching the students all over the world and being in touch with so many of them. And it's funny how you said unwarranted fear, because I can totally relate. I mean, it almost put a fuel in me when my tank was empty to just fight on, regardless of the personal cost or the collective cost, as we've seen, which is incredibly too high in Gaza. I'm so thrilled to hear you say that. Well, that said, you got a degree and you built a career in one of the most powerful industries in the world, we can say, tech. And I'm curious, before we get into the nitty gritty and what I know our listeners are keen to learn more about, what drew you to AI specifically, or software engineering, let's say? Did you ever imagine that you'd find yourself sort of through your work intersecting so directly, so confrontationally with questions of ethics and complicity and genocide?
Yeah, well, I'd say like I was gonna say it's funny, but it's more sad. But like my initial interest in computer science overall was because like back in Morocco, like there was this program that was all about like learn to code for good, and like it was all about okay, technology is actually not just for like building like random websites, it's also to solve like community problems. And so for 2 years I was part of that program where we'd solve problems like Moroccan agriculture, like students' issues in the Moroccan like educational system with technology. Like that was my intro to computer science. So in my head, like it was always tied to, oh, this is a field where we can add, like I genuinely believed because of that introduction that, oh, like this is the field where I can do the most good. So the irony of then having to deal with, oh, this is a field that's doing the most harm currently, like the current like AI and cloud weapons are lethal. Is beyond me. So if anything, like I went into it, and I went into an org at Microsoft that was deemed to be like an accessibility org. Like it was all about like speech transcriptions and speech translation, and it was supposed to be, oh, like for people who are hard of hearing or who have mobility issues, like we do the work of empowering them, of being able to use Microsoft technologies. And then turns out that technology is what's being used to surveil and translate the conversations of Palestinian civilians to then target them. So just the whole, I know it's a cliche to say like technology is like a double-edged sword or like AI is a double-edged sword, but to me it was this huge gap between why I went into the field and what I ended up learning I'd be implicated in if I like stayed in the company any longer.
It's wild. I don't know what that right adjective is. Maybe wild, isn't it? But as you were speaking, I was thinking of, as a graduate from Columbia, someone who taught there briefly. It's like I think so many people can relate to what you just described. This disconnect between like what motivated you to go into something and then what the reality is. And I think we're seeing it in full display in Columbia. They use on their brochures all these historic monumentous um, events and huge historic moments where students led some form of revolt, and they use that to kind of attract people. And then the way they sort of have been acquiescing, to put it very lightly, and just completely bending over for the Trump administration, all its crazy requirements. I mean, that's what makes, to me, this moment feel all the more dystopian beyond the horrors on the ground that we've been seeing in Gaza. And with that in mind, I want to know, I mean, so let me just get this. Like, I don't know you, but somehow I can already relate to you. Just being a Moroccan Canadian, you, like me, like so many people, we move through different cultural and political spaces. And I'm curious how, I mean, it's also a cliche, much like, tech is a double-edged sword and social media is a double-edged sword, but how has that reality of your life shaped your lens in the sense of when it comes to power, identity, and belonging?
That's a good question. I would say, well, I not that this is in any shape or form close in any way to like how like the to all like the ICE repression and like all the immigration crackdowns and fascism in the US right now. But like as an immigrant, I had to leave the US because I basically was not able to get like the work visa that I needed to stay. So I'm like, I guess, familiar in a way with like how these concepts of like honestly made up concepts of borders and like first world countries and
Nation
um
states.
Yeah, yeah, essentially, um, like control so much of our world and like put so many limits on, um, like what you can do and like what kind of life you're forced to live, what kind of like oppression, especially like in Palestine or like other places, like you're forced to endure. So actually, yeah,
Tell me.
I don't know if I answered your
You
actual
did, you did.
question,
No, no,
but
that was great. It was a very
yeah.
loaded question. My questions are always like pick and choose from them. I just like to say a bunch of words that
Yeah.
are on my mind, and then no, I guess it's just what about the sort of east west thing? I mean, do you think because I guess what I'm trying to get at is oftentimes people ask me, well, how are you so courageous? And we've been following you sacrifice so many things, and you're not afraid to stand up to power and challenge. And that's what this podcast is about. I don't view myself that way. I think for me, what informed sort of my sense of justice and being driven by human rights and sort of dignity and these concepts that are very feel very fleeting even when we do have them, for me, it was kind of going between Egypt and California and these different worlds and seeing the different norms and realizing, okay, they're very different, but they're also inherently super similar, and being perplexed by why media focuses on division, why we focus on division. And so, um, we, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to move on, but unless you have something like in terms of where you belong, do you have a sense of belonging? Where do you feel you belong? Is that even a silly question? I mean, does that question warrant an answer?
Yeah, it's like the million-dollar question. Like, I don't know. I feel like my, much like many people who moved to the US like for school, like my hope was like, oh, like after university, like just going to, just build a life here. Like there are so many opportunities. Like I very much was sold on like the American dream and whatnot. But now realizing how much the US and Canada are basically like behind oppression like globally like in Palestine and like the East overall, like I no longer have that sense of like, yeah, I have to like be one of them, like I have to like have um like integrate and make my place here. So I'm still trying to figure that out, but essentially like one thing that for sure I guess changed for me in the past, I would say like since maybe year 2 or 3 of university, is just realizing um yeah, like how much these like imperialist countries are behind my people's and like a lot of people's like oppression and yeah, just no longer wanting to like feel that pride, yeah.
It's something I can relate to, and it's like each answer you're giving me is something a version I've heard from countless friends, strangers in this moment that we're all living through. So that's encouraging to hear, I think, for me and for so many people. Because you mentioned Palestine, but also oppression elsewhere. When it comes to Palestine, do you have or do you remember some sort of very early emotional encounter with Palestine? Not as a news headline, but more as a human um story. I mean, was there when like, or is it something you always grew up with that you felt connected to emotionally?
Yeah, I would say like growing up in Morocco, like it is something you're exposed to at an early age, and it is like the cause is something that's even like included in the curriculum at times. But as you said, that's more like headlines or like theoretical. Like I always knew about the struggle. I always knew, oh, our people are constantly being like bombarded, they're still under occupation. But in terms of like human stories, I would say that's really like when I moved to the US and I when I moved to university and I actually for the first time knew Palestinians. um and I think just even hearing even like stories of like checkpoint encounters like over the summer, or like students, Palestinian students not being able to say as much as they could because, oh, Israel will just detain me when I go see my parents. Like just that was my first, like I guess, one-on-one exposure to uh, just just all the horrible conditions both in Gaza or in occupied Palestine overall. So yeah, definitely after moving to the US and getting to know Palestinians.
That's so interesting because in some ways it's ironic that it took moving there to sort of, have those experiences. I mean, I can even relate to that because I didn't go to Palestine until I was 24, but when I went to university in the US, definitely met a lot of people who had very different Palestinian identities to mine, more directly from the homeland, from the Holy Land, rather than me, who was, always in the diaspora. So, yeah, it's interesting. So for people who don't know, people who've been living under a rock or don't have social media, I'm jealous of them, but good for them. I want to share with them your background. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were working at Microsoft for several years. You were in the AI division, and you discovered, is it fair to say, the company's direct role in enabling Israel's military operations or genocidal operations in Gaza? I mean, can you walk us through not necessarily a particular moment, but what did it feel like to you as you sort of discovered that more or were more aware of it? The connection you had to that machine of violence and erasure.
Yeah, so I was in my fourth year at Microsoft. I was a software engineer. And I would say sometime in early 2024, like our group, No Azure for Apartheid, had done the work of exposing that Microsoft has, to some extent, like ties to the Israeli military and government in the form of like their cloud contracts. But I'll say throughout like 2024, like I did feel like, okay, this is not somewhere like I can stay, because I don't know at what point um I'll have to deal with these technologies that we're supplying to the Israeli military. But what really like just switched the like switched the situation, switched the trigger, was in 2025, in February of 2025, AP News released this more detailed report that actually showed how AI provided by Microsoft is being weaponized by the Israeli military and government, including, which basically like shattered my world, was like it included how my area, which is like speech and language, was also weaponized to target Palestinians. And that to me was like, it moved everything from, okay, yeah, I eventually cannot be here anymore, to, oh, like this is direct complicity. Like I can't just even like quit and go live my life. Like I have to actually denounce it. Like it's a lot more entrenched than what was visible initially. And even now, like it keeps getting more and more like atrocious. Like even Microsoft now, as of last month, admitted to having these contracts, admitted to helping the IOF with getting the hostages back, or however they're trying to frame it, just actually admitted to contributing to military operations in Palestine. So um, to me, I would say the main trigger was in February, when I realized, oh, this is not just, oh yeah, we do a lot of things, but some of our products, are somewhat complicit. It was this entire company is serving the genocidal entity now.
It's directly complicit and knowingly and deliberately. I can't imagine how difficult that must be because I haven't had that experience necessarily the way you have. A moment when you sort of feel you have to become a whistleblower or break your silence, not necessarily only because you want to, but because I would imagine, as you're describing it, as shattering your world, I would imagine like the idea of staying silent for you became unbearable. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but since then we've seen Microsoft partner with, as you know, they've been partnering with Unit 8200 and OFAC, and they're, using it to build so-called kill lists, much like Palantir. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, do you consider yourself a whistleblower? I mean, have people called you that, and does that matter to you? I mean, I'm curious because it has so much. It's such a loaded term.
Yeah, I'd say like I'd love, I mean, it would be an honor to be that. I'd say like a lot of what I revealed had been revealed previously by like Nawajra for Apartheid or like other whistleblowers in the company through AP News. I would say maybe in the effect of actually getting the news outside like the tech world and the tech bubble, like I feel like and that wasn't even something I intended to do, like it just happened, but just getting people outside of like Seattle and the Silicon Valley to be aware of Microsoft's complicity and boycott worldwide and organize actions like worldwide in their universities and in their cities wherever Microsoft is. I would say like that's more of the whistleblowing aspect that followed April.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that yeah, the term I see what you mean about the distinction. I mean, I guess what I'm curious about is like, I mean, let's talk about that day briefly. I'm sure you've talked about this at nauseum, so I don't necessarily need a play-by-play. But I'm curious if you had to boil it down to something. I mean, what gave you the courage to disrupt a major Microsoft event with the AI CEO Mustafa Suleiman, also a fellow Arab, if you will. I mean, can you take us into some of your mind and body in that moment? I mean, what were you trying to say, not just to Microsoft executives? Like, did you have an audience in mind when you said, shame on you, to Mustafa, your hands and Microsoft's are covered in blood? And you said, how dare you celebrate when children are being killed? If I'm not mistaken, Bill Gates was there in attendance, Steve Ballmer, Satya Nadella. I don't know if they were all physically in the room. I think they were. I mean, what was your intention?
Yeah, I would say like the intention was I would say like twofold, but it just again like unknowingly it ended up being on three fronts. But initially it was a just confronting the actual executives that are making the deals behind the scenes, like in the private rooms. Just like yeah, we know, and we're not. This is not something that we consented for. Like none of us decided to work at a weapons manufacturer, and we will be loud about it. Like we will not just quit and let you go on with it. But the second aspect of it, and that's what came also out of the mass emails that Vanya and I sent, was actually educating employees at the company because again, like this, even within Microsoft, a lot of people didn't even know. Like this is so hush hush, and like we were in the bubble of people that cared about Palestine, and we knew, but another big point was just getting other workers to realize that their work is complicit and then not just like realize that but also take action. So like in all our messaging, all our emails, all our talks, it's like organize with us, like speak up, do something. You can't just say yeah, I know, and it feels bad and I'll just go back to my 9 to 5. But then what I was saying about it end up being on three fronts, it is because of the like media attention and the media presence in the room that we hadn't even incorporated in the plan. Like it ended up also being like a mass, like a global campaign for the boycott of Microsoft, which was perfect because Microsoft had joined the priority list, the BDS priority list, like a couple of days prior. So the timing was just great for getting that global message out there.
There have been so many others who followed suit at Microsoft and even elsewhere in tech. And I have no doubt that your courage, or whatever you want to call it, let's agree that's not the right word, but your choice to do what you did inspired them clearly. And I guess I want to know, before I move on to some of that and where we are now and what you think of it, is there something that people would be surprised to know about Microsoft's reaction, whether the executives or other workers? I'm just curious, based on you how you've navigated the world since then and your communities of friends, of colleagues. Is there something that surprised you or that you think would surprise our listeners?
Yeah, in terms of um like the workers side of things, like a lot of people are like, oh, why like is everyone else silent, or like it's seen as oh, these two people did the brave thing and that's it. Like one like I'm sure you know, but like just to clarify overall is there are a lot more agents like behind the scenes in this organizing work. Like it's dozens of people that came together to even make April possible from No Measure for Apartheid. So like as much as it looks like it was like, oh, this brave act by two souls, like a lot of people have been mobilizing for weeks prior to that. And then in the aftermath, I think the biggest thing right now is Microsoft used to be this, especially like for us, like immigrants, or like Arabs, like whatever category, like it used to be this like badge of like prestige, like, oh wow, you're in like big tech.
I'm sure in Morocco, there's people who often say that
Yeah.
to you, like, MashaAllah, I'm sure,
No,
rightfully. I honestly had like, because I thought about you and I was like, wow, like, and I have so much I want to ask you about Morocco, but I don't want to get necessarily into politics. But is it, sorry, I have to interject. Was it a coincidence that after that event, there were some of the biggest protests in Morocco against the genocide? At least that was my
yeah,
perception.
yeah, yeah. Like I did get reports of like from like friends who were still in Morocco that like some people felt an extra, I guess, push to mobilize after that, especially
Hmm.
like after our news like made the news not just in Morocco, but now it's like, oh, someone from Morocco disrupted like the like Moroccans are seen as this,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. If she's doing that there in the belly of the beast, what are we doing is an obvious question many people subconsciously or consciously must have asked themselves. Sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm glad that it inspired like
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
No.
God, I didn't want to interrupt you. There's the delay. Go ahead.
Oh
Finish.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
the
Go ahead.
lag is doing that. But I was gonna say no. Like like in my head, it was like, oh, if one person at Microsoft, like resigns or signs the petition or organizes as a result of this, like it will have been worth it. So to
Mhm,
see, like even in Morocco, like people,
mhm,
like call for boycotts, call for protests, and even, like within Microsoft, a lot of people have been like sending, like mass emails, have been organizing more than before. I
mhm.
think like Vanya and I both were not expecting that. Like it was not even in our list of reasons for disrupting. So that's been like yeah, a great and unexpected side effect.
So I'm going to talk you through some things, and if it's boring, forgive me. I'll have to cut it for the audience. But I don't know if you know, I'm sure you do. Students disrupted an event held by Microsoft at Imperial College London on Wednesday. And I think during the UK NTO is like Glenn Robinson's speech about Microsoft's AI technology and Azure cloud services. The student protesters took over the event, essentially interrupting Robinson, saying your profits are covered in Palestinian blood, echoing a lot of what you've said. You know, your AI technologies are being used to kill Palestinian children, and they said like, how do you answer to that? How can you answer to that? I saw that question, you know, in the video I watched. They also were chanting Ibtihal, you make us proud. um, and obviously, you know, we've seen others like Joe Lopez, a Microsoft employee and a member of also No Azure for Apartheid, disrupted a keynote by Satya Nadella, I believe, during the Build 2025 conference in Seattle, I think just on Monday. And we've seen others, you know, former employees like yourself, but Hassam and Vania disrupting an AI event at the Build 2025 as well. I mean, two questions come to mind. I'll keep it brief. When the students chanted Ibtihal, you make us proud, what does that make you feel? I'm curious. And then more importantly, what do you make of that question? How can the executives answer to that? Are you satisfied? I mean, obviously that's a silly question.
Yeah, so for the first question, and it's something I left them as a comment on the post, like sincerely, like genuinely, like I thought that was funny because I was tearing up like watching that and seeing like the points that we've been trying to make for months just
Mhm,
be echoed like in a different country, in a university setting, like not something that we had nothing to do with. And the fact
mhm,
that they were able to just shut it down, like in a lot of our chants, protests, like we say like shut it down, and like we always have this slogan of like no business as usual. But the fact that they did it concretely, like they did not let the event go through, like I was feeling very emotional about that. And just again, as I was saying, like students are like a huge source of inspiration to me. And then hearing that, I was like, oh, Uno reverse. Like
Same.
it is the work of students throughout the years. That's like
Yeah.
motivated me and a lot of organizers. So yeah, if anything, like, and everyone at No Agenda for Apartheid was like circulating the video. Like we felt really proud that the messaging was global now, and yeah, that they again like fully embodied like no business as usual. Um, the second question on
Yeah.
the executive's response, as I was mentioning, so we had like a petition, like a workers' petition with thousands of signatures that we sent to Microsoft in May, and then in the same evening they issued this statement called like Statement on the Issues of Gaza and Israel, something like that, and then they basically were like, yeah, we have these contracts, but we're actually only using them for good, like rescuing the hostages, and also it's not like, and yeah,
I
and
know, I
yeah,
know, I know. I want to get
yeah,
into that in a bit. Go on, go on, go on, go on. I was honestly, it's like how, I mean, it's sad to me that that can happen and be reflected and reported and translated as
yeah,
a legitimate response and not just contradictory, but also
yeah,
misinformation and,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
disinformation, essentially.
It was
It's
terrible. Like
tragic.
it was, yeah, as you said, like full of contradictions between, yeah, we conducted a thorough review and we actually don't contribute to the genocide. And then, so we actually don't know what our products are used for. So we can't know that they're not contributing. Like it was just like a lot.
Yeah,
It was, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's like
it is
lawyers.
definitely. And so the fact that after all this, like the reaction is to still try to like absolve themselves of responsibility, and then they've
Mm,
also ramped up on all of their like whitewashing efforts, like with like responsible AI conferences, AI for good conferences, sustainability conferences. Like they're just trying to just whitewash their image. It has
our
been
marketing
like
scheme. Yeah,
beyond just
yeah.
disappointing. Like it's honestly at this point it's just embarrassing that this is their reaction to like a global campaign for them to divest and contracts with the Israeli government. So that's been their response so far. But we also know that it has thrown them in a crisis. Honestly, like just the ramping up of security at any Microsoft event, just like the like specialized trainings on like how to
Yeah,
handle protests. Like they are. In a bad place and they know it, like they know that as a people we have the upper hand, and so now they're just scrambling. And a very
yeah,
recent like I guess reaction that I wanted to highlight is they after like more mass emails were sent out, they started censoring the words Palestine and Gaza. So if you send any email that has one of these two words, it gets blocked.
that was real. That was accurate because people, when I posted that, my friends who were, sometimes we do get things wrong, but my friends were like, that can't be, that's must be. There's no way they're censoring internal, communications of the word Palestine. I said, no, I think
It's true, and they have
it's true,
admitted
right?
it, and they've admitted it as, yeah, we're like reviewing, moderating emails that are not pertinent to work, like just like a nothing sandwich. But they've admitted that there is a block on those
Yeah,
words.
yeah.
So their reaction is to try to censor us more.
Meaning, if you send it, it doesn't go through. Is that what I'm understanding? If you send an email
So
now, it doesn't
now
go
what they
through.
do is like
Is that
essentially a human has to go and review whether the use of Palestine and Gaza is like for business
something
purposes,
going
or if
through?
you're
Mhm.
talking about Microsoft's complicity basically, and um like blocks it if it's not, just an however they call it, like work related. Yeah.
So listen, in the spirit of time, because I told you 45 minutes, but I have a couple more questions. If you're okay to stay a little bit longer, great. If not, I understand.
No,
Um,
I have 12 more minutes because I just have a meeting at 2. I didn't even realize we were at 45. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, yeah, me neither. It's been okay. So I'm gonna cut through a lot of this. I just want the audience to know. While preparing for this interview, I saw that I had tweeted in 2023, long before the genocide began, on October 7th, an article about how Microsoft's internal culture is extremely hostile to Palestinian supporters. And it talked about how after the killing of George Floyd, they promised to create a twofold increase in the number of Black executives, and the same went for repealing Roe versus Wade. And Microsoft, since then, has been donating to organizations like the IDF, along with giving, I think, a $3,000 stipend to Israeli employees during the war. I guess what I'm trying to ask is there must be a lot of tech workers who are told by Microsoft or by society that their labor is sort of neutral, right? It's just data, it's just code. What would you say to colleagues who definitely feel uncomfortable by what their work is being, how it's being used, or the politics associated, but somehow are paralyzed to act?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like sometimes because again like this is a comfortable position and it is a prestigious position and it's a stable role in like a huge field, like it's easy to try to find sort of not necessarily excuses, but like rationalize our positions within these companies. Like, okay, well, I'm not
Hmm.
the one signing the contract, so like, why is it on me? And just like being like opposing Microsoft's complicity, but trying to find loopholes to just absolve any worker from like having to take any action. But a matter of fact is like Microsoft needs workers to run. Like just even if like
Hmm.
leaving aside the fact that oh it's like your code that ultimately makes it to like the Israeli military, just the fact just being able to help Microsoft thrive and like function as a corporation, even just being a cog in the machine, is a level of complicity,
Mm.
even if you're not signing the contract. I'd say that alone should
Mm.
like it should not sit like comfortably with anyone. And the thing is now because of how this movement has grown and because of the media picking up on this, we have resources. Like first of all, No Agenda for Apartheid by itself is like a huge group now with like a lot of like it has like support systems for people who are either
Is it growing? Do you feel there's momentum? Are you encouraged that even if it's not enough? I think so much of what people struggle with in this moment is no, it feels like no matter what we do, the student encampments, people like you, it feels like the system finds a way of like containing it. Other people say no, there is a major shift happening, and justice takes time, liberation takes time. Are you encouraged by the growth of this movement that you were a part of and others, or do you feel like it's not enough?
I think there is momentum. Like I can't speak in detail about like the specifics, but
Sure,
we
I get
know
that.
that the needle is being moved at these companies. Like we know that executives are for once starting to grapple with, okay, what is the cost of having these contracts? Because ultimately what these
Mhm.
corporations care about is just profits. So the moment they're gonna stop being
Is
complicit
mine.
in genocide is
Yeah.
when we make it too expensive for them to continue being complicit. And they're starting to realize,
Hmm.
oh, this might actually be very costly to us. So there is momentum, not just in corporations, but even like here in Canada at like a political level, like more politicians are folding under pressure and even coming up with, even if they're like
Hmm.
nonsense, like not complete, like incomplete statements and actions, they're feeling the power and the pressure of the masses. So I
Something.
think now is a crucial
Right. The
moment
pressure.
for
Mhm.
anyone to join and to use their voice and their position, especially at Microsoft, to increase that internal pressure even further.
Tihal, in the spirit of time, because I know you said you have to go, I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions. And if you can keep the answer short so I can get an answer from you on each. They're very short. Just whatever you think is like the nut and the heart of the answer. I have to talk about Morocco and Arab countries in general who are formerly allies of Israel under the Abraham Accords. I mean, when Morocco normalized, I mean, ethnic cleansing was already happening. Arguably, genocide was already happening. How do you think we, as Moroccans, Arabs, or members of the African diaspora, grapple or navigate that tension between, national pride and state betrayal? What to you does solidarity look like across borders?
I think to me, like Moroccan solidarity looks like the people that were in thousands, like in tens of thousands on the streets this year. Like it's what I was saying similarly to Microsoft. It's like the power of the masses. It's our individual voices coming together, I think supersedes any um like formal structures that might not be aligned with our opinions and values.
Love, love that. You've been smeared, you've been labeled by certain people as a radical, as ungrateful, but I'm curious, what has been the most surprising or moving form of support? You mentioned briefly the students when I asked you that question earlier, but have you received sort of support from somewhere you didn't expect to?
Yeah, I think just being flooded with like people internationally trying to help with like next career steps was not something I was expecting. And it goes back to that whole point of if you do something for the cause, um, like people have will have your back. Like you're not in this alone. It's not like you speak up. Um,
It's
there
true.
are repercussions and then you have to sort it out. Like just realizing in that moment just how again like global and strong the movement is from just yeah people from like all over the world being like oh you can come work here instead like tell me tomorrow and you can start is was really overwhelming yeah.
That's amazing. Did you take any of those offers up?
So I do work at Yaqeen Institute now, like Yaqeen Canada, which was like I got in touch with the Yaqeen folks after the disruption and the firing, so it was a direct result of that act. Yeah.
Any regrets?
No, no, every like honestly, maybe just not tearing things apart more.
Going hard enough?
Sorry?
No, I'm joking. I said not
Yeah,
going
yeah,
hard
yeah.
enough.
Like
Sorry, I couldn't
no,
help myself.
no, no,
Maybe that's it.
literally like oh, was there even more I could have done? But in the moment, that was what was possible. So yeah, no regrets.
Well, you answered some of my last questions, so I'll leave the audience and you with this one. Outside the campaigns, outside the headlines, and all of that, I'm curious what brings you joy, and what would you say to the people who have been hopeful and then had their hope wane because of the reality of the ongoing impunity and just even when there's a shift in rhetoric in Europe and Canada, as you said, from elected officials, it feels like not enough tangible action. What would you say to people to give them hope in this moment?
I think it's two aspects. One is even just like I've been in touch with people still in Gaza and they have eyes on us. Like they're seeing what we're doing and just like if anything you do gives one person in Gaza hope that liberation is close, that we're nearing the end of this oppression. Like to me that alone honestly is worth doing anything. So just remembering that the people of Gaza see us and that it gives them strength in like some of the most horrible days since 2023 to keep going, I think is has been has been like sometimes even when I'm like, is has this actually like achieved something? Just knowing the effect like in Gaza is enough in and of itself. But also like we focus a lot, like rightfully so, on where our like politicians are still lacking, where our corporations are still lacking, like what we still have to do. But it's also important to reflect on the smaller wins that we've had along the way, just to because otherwise like we fall into that message of like things are hopeless, nothing's gonna change. Yeah,
Amen.
yeah.
Celebrate the small victories. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Well, listen, speaking of that, I want to celebrate you in the outro. I just want to really say from the bottom of my heart, because I've found myself sometimes wondering and questioning if the videos and the documentation, the reporting I've done in the past or since the genocide began, like, is it enough? Is it worth it? I've been there. And I just want to say to you, directly, thank you for being someone who listened to your conscience and refused to be complicit. Thank you for speaking out in a world that I think tries to separate the personal from the political. You really reminded me and so many other people that our choices at work are inseparable from our values at home. And maybe to me one of the biggest lessons of getting to know you and what you did and who you are and what you stand for is that resistance doesn't only have to start at a protest or at a there are so many ways, quiet ways, loud ways, where you can start with the realization that you can't keep going until you speak out. And that's why I called this podcast Out Loud. And that's why I'm so thrilled that you didn't only challenge Microsoft, but maybe without realizing you really did challenge so many of us in a beautiful way to reflect on our values and our morals and what we want for ourselves and our lives and the people around us. So thank you so
No, yeah,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much for yeah, all the documenting all the information like in these podcasts to actually like I think for me just like seeing previous episodes like it's always like inspiring to feel like oh it's not just like me as a person that's trying to do something. So
That's
yeah,
true.
thank you so much for that.